Okay, I am too. From fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Pod Therapy. Real people, real problems, and real therapists. You can submit your questions anonymously at podtherapy.net or email us at podtherapyguys@gmail.com. The Pod Therapy online store has been up and running, and as it turns out, not very profitable. We think it's because of the name. So we are actually going to be changing the name of the podcast. Henceforth, Pod Therapy will now be known as Cobra Kai. So please visit podtherapy.net for all your Cobra Kai merchandise. And now, broadcasting from the Churn, that guy is Dr. Jim Jobin. I'm Nick Tangeman. It's time for some Pod Therapy.
If we're going to do this, let's just go big. Let's call it Disney. I just think that Disney Pixar, that'll be fine. This will be a whole new name for the show. People buy
I do feel we are too small to mess with.
Yeah, there you go. That feels right.
Who's going to waste their time?
Yeah, it's not worth the lawyer call.
It just came in.
It just came in.
There's already been a season.
That's true, because I didn't think about it. Disney is Big Brother, so they are definitely listening.
Yeah.
They've already...
And we're talking to Jim on Zoom.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
So we are technically broadcasting.
That's true.
They're already here.
So, yeah, Jim's not in the studio today.
I am via Zoom. Because, as you may have heard, there is a pandemic out there, and I am staying safe. So
that's not why you're on Zoom,
right?
That's why. I'm here.
That's not why you're on Zoom.
And because
I know everybody.
I wanted you guys to see my glorious
everybody
mustache.
Everybody listening is like, but we've been in a pandemic, so that doesn't make sense. Why now all of a sudden? Well, it's because Jim became emotional in a little plastic box.
Yes.
And
yes, it messed with me.
Check out the Patreon version of the show if you want to hear that story.
All about my COVID test journey and the subsequent paralyzing anxiety that came along with it. Go to patreon.com/therapy, and it will set the stage for why I'm recording from afar today. But Happy New Year to everybody out there. Happy New Year, Nick and Jacob.
Yeah,
Happy New Year.
Woot woot. Welcome to 2021. And as is our tradition on Pod Therapy, at the beginning of every year, we like to role model goal setting. It's on the top of everybody's mind. Everybody's thinking about what they want to accomplish in the next year. And as therapists, that's actually a big part of what we do with people, is help them at the very beginning of therapy to be thinking really carefully about goals. And we've talked about this in the show. You can go back, in our history, you see at the beginning of every year, we always revisit this topic. Because goal setting is such a big part of what we do as therapists, we try to show you how therapists think of goals, because I think we approach it differently than what you see out in the regular, universe. And then we try to structure our goals so that you can kind of role model that. So today we're going to talk about goal setting for the new year. We're going to talk about a specific acronym that we use, which you've seen in the past, called SMART Goals. And this year, if you go to patreon.com/therapy and you find this episode when it is published, which usually is published on a Wednesday, you can actually participate. We have a little worksheet that we're going to post attached to this episode. So you can do your own homework. If you want to do your own SMART goals at home, you can take a look at that. And we can talk about that. But before we get into individual goals, we want to talk a little bit about podcast goals. We think of Pod Therapy as a season. We think this is officially season 4. God, Nick, isn't that crazy? This is the 4th year that we've been doing the show.
I did the math, and that does check out. So
yeah, calendars do not lie.
Not terribly crazy. Yeah,
that's nuts.
4 does come after 3.
Yeah, it still seems to add up. So this is season 4 of Pod Therapy, and I think every year we try to set a few goals for the podcast. And I don't know if you have any goals in mind, but a couple of things. First, to remind everybody, if this is kind of the first episode that you're finding us, or an episode you've decided to start with, or if you've been following along with the show for a while but never really got a proper introduction, beginning of the year, we like to reintroduce ourselves to the general audience, introduce the show, introduce the mission, talk a little bit about our goals for the show, and then individual goals, and talk about SMART goals. On that note, we should introduce ourselves again, Nick. What do you think about that?
Okay. Yeah, I'm Nick.
Hi, Nick. Welcome.
Over to you.
I hate you.
What do you want me to say? I'm Nick.
So far, this
Nick,
is just going gangbusters.
Yeah, this is.
Best show of
I
the
guess
season.
you kind of
so
threw
far.
a curveball there. I didn't know we were going to introduce ourselves on the
It
first
literally
episode of
says it
season
in the
4.
notes.
Isn't that what the opening credits do?
Yeah,
It's in,
I'm
the
Nick.
it's in the theme song.
Well, okay. So for anybody who's happened to be, if this is your first episode, sorry, but yeah, my name is Nick Tangeman. I'm a drug and alcohol counselor here in Las Vegas, Nevada.
Really?
Yeah.
That's what he did.
So there you go. That's my specialty is addiction treatment, and then also co-occurring disorders with dabble a little bit in the mental health piece. So
And
that's what I
also
do.
golf.
I didn't know where to. Okay, I golf as well.
Don't you have a girlfriend?
Oh, I have. Yes, thank you. Thank you. This is. You guys are just teeing these up for me.
What are you, a Gemini?
I wear a size 8.5 shoe.
What's your sign? Very
I
good,
got to
Nick.
tell you, if Jim had told us about this bit before the show, this is how I thought it would go.
Even with planning, this is 100% of what it would have done.
Yeah.
All right. Well, there you go. So that's Nick. I'm Jim. I am a mental health therapist and also come from an addictions background too, and have a private practice here in Vegas. And yeah, so we are two therapists in Las Vegas. We've been doing the show now. This is our 4th year starting the show. This is just a project for us. It started off as kind of a labor of love. We liked podcasts. As people just who enjoy it. And then we also really liked educating people about what we do. And Nick and I were real life friends forever and, lovers on the side and colleagues, and not particularly in that order, any number of those. Think of it like a sandwich. It was just sort of there. But yeah, so at one point we decided, we'd go to like a bar and have a beer or whatever. And we'd, chat up other people at the bar and they'd ask us what we do. And we'd end up just talking, mental health with people. And we were always, really pleased with, what that felt like to just normalize it. People would, oh my God, you guys are therapists? Like, yeah, no, we are. And, we just come off normal to them or fun. And that inspired people. People would say, oh, okay, maybe I'll go talk to a therapist. I'm like, yeah, you should. No big deal. And we thought, let's do that. Let's do that as a podcast. And so, yeah, this is our 4th year with that model. And that's when Pod Therapy was born. The mission of the show is pretty simple. We just want to normalize mental health for everybody. That's the goal. And so our show is R-rated. You'll notice all of the episodes are marked as explicit content. It is meant for adults. It is not meant for kiddos. We talk about real things. We talk about drugs and sex and death and all sorts of stuff. We, use profanity on the show, but that's partly just to show this off hours, kind of real talk approach. And, we bust balls. We have a good time. It's very relaxed and yet still, hopefully sincere and educational. And yeah, so that's kind of Pod Therapy in a nutshell. And this is our 4th year doing it. Thanks for sticking around for 4 years, Nick.
Yeah. I God, so many times I've wanted to walk out, but
I know.
I just keep
on coming back.
I've got nothing better to do.
Luckily, I have that boombox I keep standing in front of your house holding up.
Yeah.
So the third voice that you hear on this show has been with us now pretty much since, I think, season 1. Did Jacob join this season 1 at the end
I think
of
it was
season
2.
1? Or season 2? I think it was before
I think.
Scoopfest. So that would have been season, I don't know, probably 1.
Doesn't matter.
Jacob
A while ago.
is here. Jacob is the audio engineer for a bigger show and ultimately multiple shows and Las Vegas shows. But he kindly hosts us for Pod Therapy and has become 100% part of the team. And so he's every bit as much part of what we do as either of us is. We started jokingly coming up with this moniker that he is a life coach. And then that shit caught fire and he got a fucking theme song. And now
It's true.
it's way more impressive than either of our shit. We don't have theme songs. And so that's the third guy.
I like this. I like Jim just introducing me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fine.
Very nice. Yeah.
I like
Well,
it.
For years, Nick just wanted to never, ever mention you and just see what happened.
Well, yeah, that was kind of, it's just the third guy that we never really introduced, but
Yeah.
he's just kind of there.
Yeah, people are just curious. Who the hell is that guy?
Never to be introduced again.
Yeah.
This was it.
This
You
was
missed
it.
this show.
No.
You just continue not knowing who
How
I am.
will I ever catch up?
Yeah.
So that's our show. That's our show in a nutshell. That's the team. And it's a podcast that, is just about normalizing mental health. Again, if you ever want to support the show, it's just a hobby for us. We all have jobs. This is just, something we do on the side. If you ever want to support it financially, you can go to patreon.com/therapy. Our army of TheraPals, TheraPods, Theradactyls, and Theraproducers make the show possible, bring us a lot of love, support each other as a community, have a very authentic and real and genuine conversation at Patreon, and we just have so much love for the community that supported us.
On that note, I would like to say to everybody, stay tuned at the very end of the episode because we are going to be doing some announcements regarding the Patreon tiers and some changes that we are making. Because I know some people, once they get to the end of the show, may cut out early and not listen to the rest of it. That's totally cool. I wouldn't either. But definitely
make it
stick
past
around
the
for the
jingle.
announcements. Yeah, definitely stick around for the announcements because we have some changes to the Patreon stuff that I think you're going to like, hopefully.
Hopefully. Yeah. Or we'll lose everybody one way or the other. It's going to be newsworthy. So anyway, So that's Pod Therapy in a nutshell. That's our project. And here at the beginning of the year, it's a great opportunity for you to think about what you want to do with your year, with 2021, to think about goal setting. And we want to do that in a more realistic way. We want goals to actually show up and get done in life. And it's one thing to just sit back and think about it. What's that old saying? There's something like a goal without a plan is just a wish or something like that. And I think that's true. Like, unless you have a structured approach of how you're going to solve a problem, you don't have a real goal.
That's going to be a quote that's now going to be on a t-shirt.
Is that not
I'm
how
just
it
going to
goes?
put like a goal. No, I can just see it in quotations. A goal without this is a wish or
A
something.
goal without a plan is a wish.
End of quote. Jim Jobin.
Whatever. I really need to
Or
figure out how to
something.
get
Or
into
something.
this.
But yes,
need to find
okay.
that
So
password.
we've talked in the past a lot about the goal setting, all that stuff. We every year we have done this. We've actually set a goal for the year because that's what people do. People will do New Year's resolutions, which we have kind of talked about in the past. As far as one of the reasons why some of them fail is because they're more broad, without real clear objectives or action steps, and that's when they kind of start to fall apart. So if you're going to do a New Year's resolution, follow some kind of a structure like what we're going to do today with the SMART goals. We're not going to go into a whole lot of detail because we've done it in the past, so check back some of those other episodes. But to kind of give a review of the goals that we set from last year, Jim, you accomplished yours, or part of it.
Yeah.
There is a
last
part that
year's
you didn't
goal,
accomplish.
I wanted to publish a book, and I accomplished
Yeah, but
it
there
in
was-
2020.
There was an objective that you had in there.
Oh, really?
Do you remember?
No.
The one that you didn't accomplish.
Oh, no. What was it?
You were going to sell 100 copies.
You're right. So I am officially at 77 copies sold as of this recording on January 3rd. So a little under my
Okay.
goal. I'm just punting. I extend the evaluation date, and I will try again.
Yes, and the important thing here with that too is now we can look back and look at how maybe that goal or that objective wasn't realistic because of the time frame,
Right.
because your publishing date was so far late in the year that you couldn't have actually caught that. Now, the other thing that's really important though too is when we're talking about SMART goals, M is measurable. And that's the idea behind measurability, is you want to have a number in there so that you can always know exactly where you're at. So if the objective was 100, Jim knows he's at 77,
Right.
right? As opposed to if you had a more general goal that isn't measurable.
I will
like,
sell a lot of books.
I want to sell a lot of books. Yeah.
Right.
Well, what does that mean? And how can you actually say where you're at, right? You should at any point be able to tell somebody else exactly where you're at in that process.
Yeah, and I think another point that's good there too is one thing that a lot of people think about with goals that I don't think is accurate is we tend to think of them as binary, and so it's like either it's achieved or it's not achieved. And certainly there are some goals that just have to be worded that way. But notice how we're able to kind of get into this and say, okay, how successful were you, Jim? Oh, well, I was successful in publishing the book. When it came to copies sold, I was 70% or 77% successful. Okay, like we have a way to qualify that so that it isn't just yes or no, right? And so like the same thing with like weight loss goals, anything that has numerical value, it's important to not see it as yes or no, to see it as progress, not perfection. And I think that's where the SMART acronym helps us to structure it and also helps us to qualify how successful you were. So I've got another goal for this year, and maybe we could use that to kind of showcase, take it through SMART. So, you can take us through what SMART means, Nick, and ask kind of the clarifying questions. And this is hopefully a role modeling for anybody out there who's trying to set goals. So everybody that's listening to this, think about your 2021 goal. And let's do this together. Let's have Nick kind of walk us through how a therapist kind of structures goal setting, so that we can clarify it and get a good one. So this year, I'm setting a new goal for my practice, for my private practice, and I guess it's still a little blurry, and so maybe this will be a conversation that helps me kind of understand it. I want to expand my private practice. I want to feel that I'm doing more than just me doing therapy on a one-to-one level. And like I have a different, set of ideas for how to do that. Like part of me has thought about opening up a sober living. That would be really cool. I've wanted to consider things like doing business consulting or doing speaking now that I have a book, like trying to get into conferences and doing a little bit more out of the office. And then I've also thought about like having associates, like having associate therapists or life coaches, and like incorporating them into what I do and expanding, the team of people that you can encounter as part of me. So I don't know how to do it yet, Nick, but I guess if I had to state my goal, Jim wants to expand his practice in 2021. And maybe it's already too blurry. I don't know.
So, if I was helping you, if we were creating a plan, like a treatment plan, what I would do is then I would say, okay, well, what do we mean by expand? Mm-hmm. Expand is not specific enough, right?
Okay.
So you've identified some of those things that would indicate what that means to you. But I guess the question to ask is, when you think of expand, what visually goes through your mind? What do you picture as expanding? And then I would have Jim talk it out, like associates. Okay, so if that's what we want, then let's narrow in on that, and let's focus on and getting more people on board with whatever your therapy, Therapy Vegas. Or I feel terrible. I cannot remember the name of your therapy practice.
It's literally just Jim Jobin and Associates, but thanks for playing.
I thought it was Vegas. Well, why is your website
That's
Vegas?
That's the website. The website is therapy.vegas.
I think it's called Pod
you're thinking
Therapy,
because
guys.
of Best of Las Vegas. You had to vote for
I was thinking...
the name of the practice was therapy.vegas on Best of Las Vegas. So that's just because somebody lazily just pasted the URL like as the name of my company. I was really mad about that.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
because I always thought it was
fixed.
Jim Jobin and Associates, but then when you did the Best of Las Vegas, I was like, oh, you must have changed the name. So had you won, you would have won an award for a clinic that doesn't even have your right name on it. Oh my God, this keeps getting better and better.
That's not my fault.
There's gotta be some way that it's your fault.
I got a trophy. Did you see my trophy? I posted it on Instagram.
I did. And I assume you bought that.
Yes, of course I did. They're not just giving those things out.
He might have stolen it.
But I qualified for it. So I got it for myself.
So anyway.
All right, so we'll pick one of my ideas of expansion. So let's pick the one where I have more people on my team than just me. So specific, the first part of SMART, specific, what exactly will you accomplish? I will add a associate to my practice.
Okay, so then we want... Now, we can continue to dig down and create objectives. So I would say that would make a good goal. So you can see now how we've gone from I want to expand my practice to I want to add another therapist to my practice. Right. That's a lot more specific. So that would be a better goal, right? So now we should create objectives and action steps. So you could use the SMART acronym for goals. But I think it's probably more useful to do it for objectives. So objectives.
So help us understand the difference between an objective and a goal.
Okay, great. So think of a goal as being the top of the ladder. Your objectives are the behavioral steps that you're going to take. So each rung on the ladder is an objective.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's the method you're going to use to get to that
Exactly.
goal. Okay.
So the goal now is Jim's going to add another therapist to his counseling practice.
Right. And
Okay.
when we qualify
So
that
that's-
goal, it seems to be fitting the SMART architecture to know that it's a decent goal, right? Because it's specific,
Yes.
it's measurable. We have a number,
Right.
one therapist. It's achievable. That's a realistic thing. It's not a silly idea. It's relevant.
Yep.
It helps my practice. It expands what I do and offers more help to more people, so it's relevant to what I'm doing. Now, the timely piece is kind of difficult. I guess I'm telling myself
Not necessarily.
I have a year?
No, just give yourself a deadline.
Okay.
So if this is a goal
December
for 2021, there you go. December 31st, 2021. So
Got
now we've hit every one of those. Now the other thing that I want to talk about too is with relevant, with R, relevant doesn't just mean is the goal relevant to my life. Relevant also means is the way that I phrase this relevant to what I want to accomplish. Okay, so I'll give you an example of that. If my goal was that I want to, get in shape, or I want to, I want to lose 25 pounds, something like that. If I create an objective of I'm going to go to the gym 3 days a week or 5 days a week, that sounds like that's a good objective.
Yeah.
But I would argue that it fails the relevancy test. And my logic behind that is because if you have success, it's not because the number of hours you spend at the gym. It's a result of what you do at the gym,
Oh.
right? Because the gym is not some magical place where you just walk in and all of a sudden you're making progress, right?
Right.
I could just as easily go to the gym, sit down and eat donuts, right?
Right.
So it doesn't matter how often I'm going or how much time. So our objectives should be relevant and focus on, again, behavior-based. What am I going to do while at the gym, right? So I'm going to spend 15 minutes on the elliptical, right, first. And then I'm going to go do, whatever exercises and actually be specific with the weights and the resistance that you're going to be putting on there. That's going to be a better objective because it focuses your mind on action steps, what you're actually going to do.
Okay. So, and I like this. So that's a really good distinction there too, because you might say, yeah, going to the gym, okay, that doesn't necessarily make your goal happen. I'm going to do 30 minutes of cardio 3 times a week. That would be a lot more specific and relevant because it actually ties to achieving the thing that you're trying to achieve. So in my goal setting, here I am saying that my goal, we've already refined it. I started off, my first draft was I'm just going to expand my practice. And now we've said, okay, Jim, you've got to crunch that into specific, get more into the weeds. Okay, I'm going to add a therapist or associate. Doesn't have to be a therapist. Could be an intern, a student, or a life coach. I'm going to add an associate to my practice. Okay. So then we're asking how to do that in an objective step.
Also,
kind of way.
I'm going to add an associate to my practice by December 31st, 2021.
Right. Okay. To get the timestamp in
So, right. Now, let's say that's our completed goal. All right. So that's at the top of the ladder. Then the next thing that we need to do is we need to identify all of the rungs of the ladder. Okay. And this is where we start getting a lot more specific. This is why it's really important to write this down too, because I've already forgotten the other things that you've talked about as far as expanding your practice, right? So if you don't write this stuff down, it's going to be very hard for you to actually follow through with it. So start thinking, here's kind of the question I like to ask people to get them thinking about this. If you were to imagine this being like a journey, right? Like a road trip, right? What is the first thing that you expect to see that would tell you you're making progress? The very, very, very first sign that you're making progress. So I don't know anything about adding an associate to a private clinical practice. So what do you think, Jim? What would be the first sign that you're making progress towards this goal?
Good question. I think the first, I guess interviewing? I guess the first step would be reaching out to a network of therapists or life coaches or whatever. I guess the very, very first step would be, how would you know Jim is trying to do this? You would see Jim trying to network and make contact, communicating a vacancy, communicating an opening or an opportunity to join the practice. And I guess that's even before, you're using that road trip analogy, that's even before reaching the first place of interviewing, I guess, would just be actively
see
communicating.
an ad on Craigslist.
There you go.
Yeah. Now, here's the other thing that you could do too, because I would push back a little bit on that, because
Okay.
I think you're thinking too big. When I say first step, I mean small step, right? Do you even know what that position is going to look like? Is this going to be a full-time? Is this going to be a part-time? Are they going to be working in your office? Are they going to be working from home?
Good point.
How are you actually going to do this in a business sense? How do you add another person? So there's a lot of stuff that you're going to have to look into and research, right?
Right.
So
the first step might be
that would
drafting
be-
a job description.
Yeah, maybe
I feel
doing
like
that.
Nick's questions are making Jim want to do this less and less.
Exactly. And I'm
just
okay
talked me
with
out
that.
of it.
Jim's now like, you know what? I don't think I'm going to add anybody.
And I'm okay with that. 100% okay with that. Not because it's Jim, but because if you're serious about doing it, if this is the thing that stops you, then you weren't going to do it anyway. That's what I would argue.
And then you should
So-
select a different goal.
Yeah, then this one isn't relevant to you, right? Then it's not it doesn't have that impact. This should be something that the more you think about it, the more it drives you to do it, right? So the more that you think about all these tiny little steps, the more motivated you are to actually follow through with it. So maybe one of the first steps that would be useful is
That was not me.
that was an interesting drop. We've never used that one.
That was a
before.
weird little effect.
Yeah.
I just did a weird button there.
That was all about motivation.
That's right. That was the motivation sound.
So one
Look how
thing
motivated Jim is now.
I'm super motivated.
So maybe here's another thing that people often forget is research, right? And starting off with that as an idea. Because if let's say, I'm going to go back to my exercise example. If I'm brand new to this and I have a fitness goal and I've never really been involved in fitness or working out before at all, maybe the first step that I should do is actually set a time to identify what my goal will be, right? Or what I imagine as fitness. Is that aerobic exercise? Is that strength training? Is that some kind of HIIT program? Something like that. So maybe I'm going to set an objective that I'm going to by January 5th, I will talk to 5 people I know that are into fitness and get their perspective. Right?
And you will offer
I like
them
this.
jobs at Jim's practice.
Two birds with one stone. That's
Yes.
efficiency.
There you go.
All
We're just
about
knocking them
efficiency.
down now.
Yeah.
No, I love
God,
this.
we're making,
I love that you're breaking
we're
it
moving
down.
along, right?
into
Okay,
these
so
micro
maybe,
goals.
yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what objectives are. I mean, and that's the big thing that I think sometimes people forget about is when they identify objectives. Sometimes the objectives themselves are really far out. Make it really, really small, because it also provides motivation when you start checking those off the list, right? So maybe talking to somebody who you know that has a private practice and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. What are some things that you've learned in this process? Or what are some things that I need to be aware of if I'm going to do this?
I like this. So to zoom back out for the listener, there's 2 things that we're simultaneously talking about when we're talking about active goal setting. The first is this particular acronym that we use, which we've actually not even read out loud yet. We probably should. And that acronym, SMART, is how we think about a goal. The goal is your top line thing. Remember Nick's talk about the ladder. So when a therapist helps you make a treatment plan, which is just goal setting, that's all it is. We start with a goal, okay? And so you've noticed how Nick helped me wedge my goal into the SMART acronym. It has to be a specific goal. How are you going to, or what are you exactly are you going to accomplish? It has to be measurable. How will you know you've reached that goal? Okay, we have to be able to know that. Needs to be achievable. So is this even realistic? Is it going to be something that you have the resources to achieve? Is that something that you can attain? It needs to be relevant. So is this significant to your life? How so? And it needs to be timely. When are you actually going to achieve this? So goal is the top of the ladder. The second thing we do underneath a goal as therapists is we start to identify objectives, and you're seeing how Nick kind of languages that. An objective is very micro. It gets down to, okay, Jim, if you're going to improve your practice or grow it, before you even think about meeting somebody, before you even think about interviewing, you need to get all the way back to the beginning of this process. What is the very first thing? What is the equivalent of putting your car in reverse and pulling out of your driveway? Like, what is the very first step on this journey? And, that's a good example of, talking to somebody and learning about this, doing a dedicated learning time where I'm going to study this, or the workout example. Before I get into the gym, before I try to lift my very first weight, the very first objective I could probably have is learning about this. I am going to learn about a basic workout routine that is generic and standard and works. And I'm going to understand why that's important, and I'm going to do it. The other thing we should probably talk about, Nick, is the thing that goes underneath objectives in a treatment plan, which we often call interventions or tasks, which actually even further break down how we're going to achieve an objective.
Not really.
Great talk.
Okay, because
You guys are nailing this today.
we are on fire. Okay, so no, interventions as we use them in treatment, some people use them differently, but for the most part, the objective is what the client is going to be doing. The intervention is what I am going to be doing as the clinician. So if I was helping you on your goal of expanding your practice, if I'm going to be included in this on a regular basis, then the intervention is my piece, not necessarily yours.
I know. Like in a treatment setting, that is correct. If you're doing medical therapy, this is the way we're thinking about it. But I'm talking about if you're structuring, if you're borrowing the idea of a treatment plan for your own goal setting, which we both feel is relevant, or we wouldn't have brought it to the audience. An intervention or a task is breaking down the objective and saying, okay, so what is that first objective? I am going to learn about how to expand a practice from somebody else who's done that. A task is holding yourself accountable to that objective and saying, okay, Jim, what's task number one? I'm going to make contact with 3 other therapists and ask them for some of their time to talk to them. That's task number 1. Task number 2, I am going to purchase a book on how to expand a practice. And I will have that book purchased within the next month, and we'll read it cover to cover. So what we're pointing out there is that you can further break it down. If you're talking to a therapist, the therapist is, thinking about what we're going to do. So like if your goal is, I don't want to suffer from anxiety anymore, and your objective is, I'm going to develop coping skills to, help me through anxious episodes, the therapist is going to write down an intervention of, I'm going to use cognitive behavioral therapy to help the patient do this, right? And like we're going to measure that every 90 days. And these are what I'm trying to do. That's fine, but I think we can still borrow that language to sort of continue to break down the tasks that people are doing to get it even down to that level, that atomic level, to make a goal happen.
Sure. I would also say, too, that you don't have to have all of your objectives identified right now. What I would do is I would schedule a regular review of your goals. So maybe on the first of every month, that's going to be your plan to review your goal.
I like that.
Right? And the reason why that's relevant is because you may start off with a goal and then you reach an obstacle that you didn't anticipate. Now, if you don't have this all laid out and planned out very carefully, and you don't allow time for review of goals, then that is the roadblock that people just stop at. Right. That's why that's one of the reasons why a lot of these New Year's resolutions fail, is because they run into an obstacle they didn't plan on encountering, and then as soon as they hit that, they just stop. Whereas if you're doing a regular review, so in our example, let's say Jim is going to identify 5 objectives that he's going to accomplish in the month of January, and none of them have to do with actually hiring staff, right? So we don't have to have any of those objectives identified right now. We just have to have the month of January planned out. And then on February 1st, Jim looks at this and he evaluates, did I accomplish all these things? If not, why didn't I? And then uses that for creating his February objectives. Right. So the goal doesn't change. The goal's still the same. But we can just break it down. Because the other thing sometimes happens too is people become overwhelmed. So you identify, 21 objectives to this huge goal, and then you kind of get paralyzed in a sense. It's just too much. You don't have a starting point. And then people just don't move forward.
Yeah,
exactly.
And then you
so just identify 3 to 5 objectives for that month, and then each month review it and create some new ones. What are the next 3 steps?
Right. Keeping it super simple, guys. Keeping it super simple. So, to recap, when you're setting a goal for your year, start by making sure it's a SMART goal. Okay. Make sure it fits that SMART acronym and ask those questions. Again, you can go to patreon.com/therapy and you can see a really handy worksheet that actually helps you draft that goal. And then once you have your goal kind of drafted in a way that matches that SMART format, now it's actionable. Now we can do something with it. Then you do what Nick said. You break it down into these objectives. And remember, there's no objective that's too small to be on the checklist. You can make a checklist where the very first box says, make a checklist, and you get to check that one off as you go. Like, an objective can be complete my goal plan, and like, okay, objective 1 is accomplished. Now let's move on to objective 2, getting micro on that thing. And if you need to break down the objectives into smaller tasks, you can do that too. And then doing those check-ins, what Nick talked about, doing the review. And as therapists, we do that too. We're constantly reviewing and revising what we consider our treatment plan, which is essentially just goal setting and observation. And so you should too. And we usually do it every 90 days. I think that's way too long for an individual. So I like Nick's idea of monthly. That way okay, in January, here's what I'm going to try to achieve. You don't have to only limit yourself to things you could do in January. You could have a whole list of things you're trying to do to complete the entire goal, which is fine, but giving yourself permission to attach those to months and then check on them throughout and just, check them off the list or evaluate. How successful was I? Okay, I got 2/3 of this done. Or, you know what, I haven't opened up this objective yet. There's nothing I've done on this front. What can I do differently on this one? So breaking it down, keeping yourself accountable, that's how you turn a goal into a reality. And that's how you make it so that it's not just a wish.
And I didn't have a goal last year.
Ooh, what's your goal?
Remember, we were talking about this. And we're like, Nick, what was yours? And I couldn't remember. So I went back and I actually listened to that episode. And I didn't have one.
You should never have to listen to our old episodes. Nobody should.
I don't.
It was terrible. Jacob, you don't listen to the current episode.
What?
Trips in and out. Well, do you have a goal this year?
You know what? I don't have it formalized yet. I kind of have it in my head. This is terrible. I'm not even following my own advice.
How about your goal is to have a goal?
But this is just kind of how my mind works. Like if I have something big that I'm going to be doing, I write down steps. Like, so for example, I've been in the process of developing this training for my organization that I work for. And it's going to be a webinar-based, like 6-week long training. And I have to break it down into steps. So I have a final goal of when I want to have it done by, and then I go backwards. So if it's going to take me 6 months to develop this, then where do I want to be 1 month prior? What do I want that to look like? Right. And then I design everything around that. And then I go back 2 months. So how will I know I'm on progress 2 months? And then I break it down like that. My current, what I'm actually going to be focusing on this year is getting back to 2019 Nick, because 2020 Nick was pretty much eat anything you want and no exercise at all. And it actually hit me when I posted that picture of me on Twitter of the mustache,
Okay.
Because I was like, man, I still have that t-shirt. I still have that T-shirt, and it does not fit the same way. Like it, yeah. And so I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do something about this. So my goal is I've gone back to my intermittent fasting, and my measurable objective is I'm going to tell 15 people a day about intermittent fasting, but it only counts if they didn't ask for the information. If they ask me about intermittent fasting, then I don't get to count that.
You can't count that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I get bonus points if it's complete strangers. So
Yes.
that's
It's time bound.
That's what I'm
You
working
get that
on.
done every week.
2021.
Well, I think you've gotten 15
Yes.
people on this podcast. I think that's about the entire range of our audience. So there you go.
There we go.
All right. Well, we are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to
Just
discuss
before we
breaking
do
up
that-
with your therapist. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
Oh, all right,
Nope,
we'll go
hold
on.
on.
I was going to ask before we do that, Jacob. Do you set any goals for yourself?
No,
No. Okay.
No.
That's-
I live life as it comes to me, man.
I kind of had a hunch.
I live life by the seat of my pants.
I mean, when you walked in wearing only one shoe, I just kind of assumed that you don't plan stuff out.
That's a man who's
But,
in the
okay.
now.
Yeah.
why haven't we ever talked about these SMART goals before? Feels like something we should have brought up before season 4.
Perhaps. Maybe you're right.
Whatever. All right.
All
I'm ready
right,
for a commercial.
this week's trivia theme. Our Patreons this week, our Theraproducers are Ellie O'Dare, Judy Schneider, Mason Miller, and Leon Kassab. Thank you guys for supporting the show. And our trivia question, our theme in honor of our Theraproducers is barbecue. So, question number 1, how many types of pork ribs are there? Bonus, if you can name them. If you know the answer, let us know. Well, we're going to give you the answer anyway. But please feel free, if you want to become a Theraproducer and support the show and make the show possible, go to patreon.com/therapy and sign up. Again, that's patreon.com/therapy.
Okay.
2.
Okay, Jacob's guess is 2. You think there's
Well-
only 2 kinds of pork ribs?
My number would just be
Sure,
an arbitrary number, but I don't even know. Is short ribs a thing? Is that one of the things? Baby back ribs?
Sure.
You're gonna guess them one by one and then give me a number?
I can only think
What's
of
your
2
number?
things I've ever even heard of. Okay, I've got 3. Here's my 3. Short
Okay.
ribs, baby back ribs,
Okay.
McRib.
You know what? I didn't count the McRib.
Oh.
The answer is 4. There's 4 types of pork ribs. There's spare ribs, which is the underbelly of the pig.
And they're extra
Extra?
because they're spare.
Spare. You're right. You're right. They go in the trunk. St. Louis style, which is similar to spare, but the breastbone is removed.
Oh, wow.
And then you've got country style, which is the highest meat to bone ratio, which was the name of Jacob's band.
Yeah.
I think.
Meat to bone ratio.
Yeah. They were a hit. They were so good. And then the 4th is baby back ribs, which has the least amount of fat. So
got
there
one.
you go.
I got one of those 4, so pretty proud
Wait,
of
so
myself.
it's 4. That
Four-
is 4 types of ribs or 4
Four
different
types-
types of 4 different styles of preparing them.
4 types of pork ribs.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
there's probably like infinite ways to prepare them, but those
Correct.
are just the 4
I believe
options
so.
when you're making
Yes.
ribs.
So there you go.
Okay. I like it. And the McRib is number 5. You gotta add that to your list for next time because nobody really knows.
Yeah, I don't know
where
why
the
they
McRib
didn't have
comes
that
from.
on there. So
That's
yeah.
obviously something. All right, we got a letter here titled Breaking Up with My Therapist. Hi, Jim, Nick, and Jacob. Thank you all for always providing a positive, uplifting podcast I can look forward to each week. And thank you, Jim, for reading an excerpt of your book on the most recent episode. I found your perspective so comforting and helpful. Oh, thank you. Originally, I was also under the impression that your book was just advice on how to be a dad. Don't worry, though. I'm sure all your listeners understand the intended audience now that you've clarified it on the podcast. That has not happened. It has not happened. Even people that I like that know I wrote the book, like Patience, are like, "Hey Jim, when are you going to write a book that's not for dads?" And I'm like, "No, it's not." Damn it. Oh, that title backfired on me. Whatever. I just purchased a copy of the book on Amazon to share with my husband. We're both fans of the show and have been through a lot this year like everybody else. Luckily, my husband has found a therapist that he really gels with, and I'm really proud of him and the personal goals he's accomplished in the past month. Oh, it's awesome. As for me, I had to end things with my therapist after 6 sessions or so because I never felt like we had any rapport at all. For example, a while back, I wrote into the show, you all started by empathizing with my position and then gave me really great insight, and then finished by giving me encouragement that things would get better. The therapist I just left was so professionally cold and completely lacked empathy. I really just felt like a number to her. She'd let me talk for about 55 minutes and then say something super basic like, "Why don't you try I feel statements?" And then we'd say goodbye. Never once did she leave me in an optimistic place at the end of the session. I've thought about it a lot, and I think at this point, what I need more than a Band-Aid solution therapist is just some encouragement from time to time and reassurance that other humans experience the same things I do. Which is why, in the time of COVID, when I feel separated from family, I am happy to have Jim's book to give me a pat on the back now and then. Thank you for all of these plugs. This is fantastic. I like that this question keeps bringing it back to the book. In conclusion,
I was really hoping it was going to be like, in times like this, I'm really happy to have Jim's book to prop up tables and such.
In these cold times, Jim's book is very flammable. In conclusion, thank you, Jim, for your relentless positivity. Thank you, Nick, for your realistic approach that always finds a way to make the hard things in life manageable and conquerable. And thank you, Jacob, for always making me laugh. Happy holidays and Merry Christmas, Anonymous.
Well, thank you. That was very kind. Yeah, so, I mean, what I kind of get from this letter to the writer is it seems like you have clarified the position a therapist would have in your life. And that's great, because I think you only get to that conclusion by trying out therapy. Right. And then once you're in it, then you kind of realize what you're looking for. So sometimes you have to kind of break up with your therapist if it's not actually meeting that need. But now you have a clearer idea of what you're looking for in therapy. And that makes total sense.
It does. I mean, so it sounds like the writer has already kind of done that, has already communicated to the therapist, hey, I'm going to discontinue appointments. I'll reach out to you in the future if I ever need to, or whatever. Like, I assume that's what breaking up probably looked like. If the writer hadn't done that yet, I guess one thing that I probably would have challenged her to do is to maybe sit down with a therapist and say, so I want to kind of talk about our approach and some of, what we're working on here, because I want to see if we can incorporate some different styles or whatever. But I also realize it's really hard for a patient to do. Like whenever I do my intakes, one of my very favorite questions that I learned from a therapist mentor who's actually my supervisor, and I remember being so stunned by the way he did this, and I remember thinking, I'm always going to do that in my intake sessions. When I sit down with a patient and we do the getting to know you thing and we're starting to talk about their life, toward the end of the first session, I'll always say, have you ever talked to a therapist before? And, okay, you get that data. They say, yeah, sure, I've done it before, or I recently left a therapist, or no, I've never done it. Okay, great. A lot of times they'll say, yeah, I've done couples work before, but this is kind of my first individual time, or whatever. Great. My next question is, so I want to learn how to customize my approach to you. I want to be the best version of me that matches what you need and is successful for you. Can you teach me what qualities are useful to you in a therapist? And if they don't have a therapist or have never had a therapist, I'll ask them. Maybe people in your life that have been useful to you, good friends, mentors, coaches, colleagues, bosses, anybody in your life who's had a role where they've been responsible for helping you succeed. What qualities work for you? And I try to tease that out by asking that version of the question multiple times. But, usually the person will teach me, okay, this works for me. I remember when my mentor had asked me that question. He was interviewing me to be his supervisee. So I was signing up to be an intern under him, and he was going to mentor me. And I really loved how he asked me that. He said, Jim, you're a grown man. You've been through life. What kind of mentor do you need me to be to bring out the best in you? What works for you? And I was able to tell him, you know what, I work really hard in life to, try to do good at this. I would like the benefit of the doubt. If you feel like I'm wrong about something, I would want you to challenge me on that. but a personal adjutant is whenever, people don't give me the benefit of the doubt, on something that I probably have a good reason for why I wanted to do this thing or whatever. And that was great because he was like, hey, thanks for teaching me that. Like, I don't want to be condescending to you. I don't want to be patronizing to you. Apparently that's going to really be off-putting if I do that. Thank you for letting me know. I don't want to be that kind of supervisor to you because that doesn't work for you. Great. And like that set us up for huge success. So anyway, back to the writer. I guess in an ideal world, if you are going to partner with another therapist in the future, maybe find a way to incorporate that into that first meeting to share with them. So I did recently leave behind another therapist. Here's specifically what wasn't working for me. And then say what you told us. Here are the styles I think work for me. That's not based on years and years of therapy. It's based on life experience. I seem to do well when people are encouraging. I seem to do well when people normalize my human experience for me and help me right-size it in the spectrum of humanity that other people are going through this. And I seem to do well whenever people are optimistic and give me real-world practical solutions. I like to be listened to, but it's kind of off-putting if somebody just seems to be listening to me and they don't seem to be actively workshopping the problem with me. That's not as good for me, right? Being heard is nice, but it feels a little like bland if it's just me talking. That's great. You could literally read this letter to your next therapist, and I think it would be tremendous for them to hear that because we as therapists generally want to adapt our strategy to the human and bring what they're going to need to be successful.
Yeah, I think another thing to kind of think about too is that therapy isn't always going to be everything that you want it to be. There's going to be times where it is going to be uncomfortable, and a therapist's job sometimes is going to be to push back a little bit and kind of challenge you a little bit. So one thing I would encourage you to think about is how do you respond to that typically when it happens, and what are some ways that you tend to respond favorably to that? So if you were in therapy and the therapist heard something that kind of caught their attention and kind of concerned them a little bit, how would you want that to be brought up? Because that also kind of plays into the interactions and the relationship that you're going to have with your therapist, and that would be another thing to communicate to your therapist. That's something kind of similar to what Jim was talking about. That's something I always used to do when working with drug and alcohol clients is, I would say at some point, it's inevitable. We're going to be working very closely together. At some point, there's going to be some things that I'm going to pick up on that are going to be concerning to me. How do you want me to approach you with this? What is the best way? You know you better than I know you. What is the best way for me to bring this up to your attention? Because I'm sure neither of us want me to just ignore it and brush it under the rug, right? That's the whole reason you're here. So what is the best way to make you aware of something that I am concerned about? Wow. And kind of the same way that Jim was doing it. Like you just kind of teach the person how to talk to you. But I mean, the main point behind all of this is, obviously, I think you did the right thing. Like if you've been to several sessions and your therapist is just kind of coming off as cold and you're not really feeling any kind of connection there and it's not what you want, I think you're fine to, end it and then find somebody else that is going to be a better fit for you. I think that's perfectly fine to do it. Just also, keep that in mind too. Just kind of consider, what does that pushback look like for you in a healthy way?
Yeah, I love that. And man, you said something so profound right there, and I love it. Like, even if you're an intern out there, a student, a future therapist, I really hope that you heard how Nick did that. That is so vital, like to asking people for permission to challenge them in like this passive way that sort of reframes it. I love how he said that. A couple of other thoughts that just came to me out of that too. Writer, I like that you're not questioning the professional goodness of the therapist. That would suck, right? I wouldn't want you to say, she was a bad therapist. Jim and Nick are good therapists. No, we're different therapists, and you're encountering us in this particular format, and it happens to work for you, which is great. She's a really good therapist for somebody else, but her style doesn't match your need. Great. And I like that you're being generous with that. I hate to see people, take shots at therapy, which you're not doing. And so for everybody out there, I think that's a really important takeaway that I really want people to notice. Another thing Nick just said that, oh God, Nick, like really hits me where I live. And this, I hope, is for anybody out there who's in therapy. A lot of people will come into therapy, and when I ask them that question, what kind of therapist do you want me to be? How can I be helpful to you? they give me answers that they think are true, but then turn out to not be true. Here's an example. They'll say, Jim, I don't want somebody who just listens to me. I want somebody who gives me direct advice, who tells me what to do. And sometimes they'll even say, I'm not just looking for a therapist, I'm looking for a guide, or I'm looking for a coach, or whatever. They'll add that language. And I'll say, okay, that's fine. I advertise myself that way. I don't mind being that voice. But then over time, as Nick kind of pointed out, you'll look for the opportunity to push back on something that they're doing, or give them a challenge, or give them some direct advice and say, hey, I think you're turning left here. I think you're drifting off the road. I think you should probably turn right. And then they don't do it. Or they pull away from you and they don't like that feedback. They don't like that advice. And what you're teaching me as a therapist is don't try. Don't try to give you advice, because either you can't handle it or you're not going to do it. And that doesn't mean that I'm not going to in the future, but I think that it's good for the patient to kind of check in with themselves. And it's hard sometimes for your therapist to challenge you on that, because then if you come back to your therapist later and you're like, I just really want you to continue to give me advice. And in the back of their head, they're thinking, yeah, the last 3 times I did that, you didn't do anything I said. And, you kind of did it the other way, and, whatever, it caused resentment. So I'll be the voice to say to you what they can't. Challenge yourself, listener, to check in. Ask yourself, has my therapist given me assignments to do, even small ones, and have I done those? Sometimes, we'll give you these small assignments in the beginning of our relationship with you, like, hey, here's a list of feeling words. I do want you to start using I feel statements in your journaling, and when we come back, I'm going to be listening to hear if you start using that. And that might seem really small in the beginning, and you think, oh, this is dumb, this is not meaningful. What we're really doing is testing you, and I'll tell you, I do this all the time. I have a little handful of first, assignments that I will give to a new patient at some point in the beginning of my relationship with them, just to see who they are. Are they the kind of person that's going to do things in this relationship or not? And if they discard the small things, or I don't see them, having follow through on those things, that orients me to where I need to meet them. And that doesn't mean they're good or bad as a patient or a human. It just means I need to orient my approach to match their level of motivation and their level of commitment to this process and their level of wherewithal. So just a couple of, behind the scenes kind of observations that sometimes therapists are thinking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've done that before too. And it, just to kind of reiterate what Jim just said, it's not a sign that somebody is a good or a bad patient. It's more just to kind of understand, how do you work with somebody? What drives them, and what are the things that, like, how do they learn, like learning styles, because there are some folks that I can give a written, like, intrinsically focused assignment where they have to look inside themselves and write something, and it's going to work for some people. And then some people, they just don't respond to that. And some people have to have something behavioral that they do. And that's how they learn things. And that's perfectly fine. It's just kind of testing the waters and seeing how everybody is. But ultimately, all of this is really just kind of a shortcut, right? So like my whole method of how do you want me to give you or to challenge you or give you feedback, I learned that just as a shortcut method of what I used to do. Because what I used to do is I used to just try things and see what fit. But if you can just tell me right off the bat what's going to work, or at least that's a starting point, it saves us some time and we can get into some stuff a lot faster. But
yeah,
great letter. Thank you for writing in.
It is. And, it opens up a lot of good conversation topics. And writer, congratulations, that your husband is doing some self-care, getting into therapy. It sounds like it's been really good for him. Congratulations that you didn't let a bad experience discourage you from the greater project. Congratulations on reading my book. Go to dadvicebook.com and buy a copy of Dad Vice, 50 Fatherly Life Lessons. I need to sell 23 more to meet my annual goal of 100. Hooray! So thank you, writer, for giving me a chance to plug my book.
What are you going to write a book that's not just for dads?
Deeply appreciate it.
Yeah, I would totally read it, but it's just for dads. So there's no point.
Oh, well.
I'm not a dad.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we are going to discuss how to check your own empathy. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
Big thank you to our Theraproducers this week, Elio Dare, Judy Schneider, Mason Miller, and Leon Kassab. Today's second trivia question in honor of our Theraproducers is: the 13th day of this month is celebrated as National Barbecue Day. If you would like to join the Therapy Producers and make the show possible, you can go to patreon.com/therapy and sign up. Again, that's patreon.com/therapy.
It has to be July.
August.
It has to be.
Okay. August. Jim?
I'm going July. There's no question. It's got to be July.
Okay. Now I've got questions. Why is there no question that it has to be July?
That's obviously when
You
you
are-
barbecue. It's midsummer. July
Okay.
4th. You got all this stuff
So is
that's
August.
going on.
So it is
True.
it is July 13th. So you are correct.
Thank you.
Oh,
Yeah,
hate when
that's
Jim-
right.
I know.
Trying
Doesn't that
to
just
talk me out of
burn
my
your
damn choice.
soul?
August is way too
I just-
late. Like, what's the deal?
feel
You can't wear
icky.
white after Labor Day. You can't barbecue
it's a
after Labor
month
Day.
later.
That's a month too late, man.
So
All right,
anybody
how
want to
to
guess
check?
what I had for dinner last night?
Barbecue.
Yes.
The McRib?
Good guess. No, I had a real barbecue.
Glad that
I
all
have
your trivia
Lucille's.
questions are so
Ooh,
relevant.
I like Lucille's.
Yeah.
Oh,
Lucille's
God,
is good.
Lucille's.
Yeah.
Lucille's is
I had
crack.
crawfish at Touffet.
Oh, dude,
Made
where?
it, made a big thing of it at the house.
Oh, you made it yourself.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, what night? I couldn't find crawfish, so I
Oh.
used shrimp. So
Oh.
so
okay.
shrimp at
Scram.
Touffet.
Yeah. That'll work.
Yeah.
I prefer shrimp
does
over
sound good.
crawfish. I don't like crawfish.
Nobody asked
Which is
you.
weird.
Yeah.
Okay.
You were incorrect.
How to check my own empathy. Happy New Year's, guys. I hope 2021 is kinder to us all. Lately, I've been having some trouble with empathy. I'm not a big fan of the term empath, but I've generally considered myself as someone who can empathize with people well. However, I'm starting to sense people's emotions and moods with increasing sensitivity, and it's taking a toll on my mental health. Sometimes I end up making up fake scenarios and convincing myself of their veracity. I found a couple ways of coping with this in the past, isolating when things got overwhelming, but being stuck at home because of the pandemic hasn't been much help. My parents are in a highly abusive relationship, and I'm surrounded by conflict for the better part of the day. This has caused me to lose focus on school, work, and grad school applications. I feel compelled to show up for my friends and family in ways that take a lot out of me, and I can't show up for myself. I was wondering if you had any tips on how to deal with this. P.S. Love the book, Jim. Sincerely, Anonymous. Yes.
Oh, they must be a
Shout-outs
dad.
for the book.
Must be a dad.
Damn it.
Okay, so Jim collects these questions when they come in, and I'm starting to think that he's just adding this
Adding.
part in, all these
Nope.
little
They're legit.
compliments on the book. There's no way that many
Shout-outs
people
for
have
the
read the
book.
book.
77 people.
All
have read
75 people have written in.
Right. Yeah. So what do you think, Jim?
Okay, so a couple of things, I guess, that come out of this letter. One, I agree with that word empath. I don't love it. I don't know that any of these labeling words that we've seen, I think that are personality labels or things like that are shorthand, I get a little bit stuck on them because I think they kind of box people. But I still think there's some truth to the person's letter, right? They're saying, listen, because I live in a high conflict environment, I tend to attach to other people's suffering. It sounds like they tend to be a caretaker child, a rescuer, a problem solver, feeling the need to, fix other people's stuff or involve themselves in it. And I think this comes down to those personal boundaries, and how do we set boundaries that honor our mental health, that reflect on the fact that other people's truth is not our truth, other people's problems are not our problems, and other people's suffering is not our suffering. And I realized that, like the writer's saying, listen, in a very intuitive and innate way, it's hard for me to do that, right? It's hard for me to detach my emotional mind from my surroundings. And I'm realizing that's causing me distress. I'm losing focus on school. I can't focus on, work. I'm not good with my friends. I feel compelled to show up for them and my family. So it's a hard thing. And I think that, Nick, you and I have trained lots of therapists over the years where we're talking about exactly this. How do you be a caring human who is authentic and wanting to attach to other people and wanting to help them, but also knowing where that needs to stop and like where your personal boundary is so that way you don't burn yourself out with compassion fatigue.
Yeah, and I think it does come back to personal boundaries for the most part. And making clear personal boundaries. And if we were talking about, a therapist or coaching a therapist on how to do this, that boundary becomes work, home life separation, right? Where when you leave the office, you're going home and you're closing one door, you're opening another. It's two different worlds, and you have to keep those apart. For a non-therapist in dealing with this, it becomes a little bit more complicated, but ultimately it's kind of the same thing. Only instead of work and home life, you maybe are defining that boundary as them versus me.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like you're not really nurturing that me part of your life. And if you can't draw that boundary and you can't see a separation between what's going on with them and what's going on with me, then it's going to become very difficult to establish any kind of separation or boundary. So, getting back to self-care, and it sounds like you've tried that in the past, because you talked about how you found a couple ways of coping with this in the past, isolating when things became overwhelming. Well, that isolation essentially is a break that you're giving yourself. So that in and of itself is a little bit of self-care. But I'd also then focus on a little bit of like, what do you do when you isolate? So it's not just removing yourself away from the environment. What do you do to enhance your self-care when you are away from that environment? I think that's a big piece that we would want to dive into.
Yeah, I like that. I would focus on behavioral things, to tell you the truth, right? Or I can't come in and make you not hurt for other people, right? Like that's something that's authentic to you. That is what we're describing as empathy. And so you're going to naturally be that human. But we can talk about how that emotion has created certain behavior patterns and certain expectations in your relationships. Friends may look at you as this human that they can always come to with every single problem and dump on. Family may look at you as a mediator that they can come to you to, solve fights or get involved and bring a rationality. And that can overdraw you, right? And so that becomes a boundary blur. And where we talk about a behavioral boundary is sort of you reestablishing what you're available for and what you're not. And that doesn't mean that you tell friends, hey, listen, I can't listen to you complain this week, like it's too draining on me. But it is sort of beginning to pull back from that kind of thing. And sometimes maybe even affirmatively communicating, like, if your parents are fighting in your house and you live with them, and it sounds like you're an adult, you're in school, you're looking at grad school. And if you're in that ecosystem, it is hard to walk away, right? Like you can't just move out, and so you're stuck in that reality, but doing your best to sort of try to de-identify with what's happening and not making yourself available to be part of the triangle of conflict, not being a broker in the conversation, not being a mitigator, somebody who's got to come in there and solve the problem. If your parents try to come to you and say, hey, listen, can I talk to you for a little bit? I'm just so angry at your dad right now. Maybe telling them like, listen, it's not good for me to hear this anymore. I'm being drained by it. I love you. I don't want you to suffer. I know you're upset. But I don't think that I'm the right person to talk to about this. And so I'm going to stop being available to be that person. And there's a way to say that, that's not unkind. The other human may still feel a little bit put off by that if you have to tell a friend or you have to tell family members, I love you, but I need to not be as available to be the person hearing about this kind of stuff because I really sincerely care about you, maybe too much. I attach to this too much, and it's hard for me to keep living my life because I think about it too much. And I think a lot of people hear that as sincere and not mean-spirited, but there's a behavioral component of what we can establish with a boundary that can help you to not suffer as much. I don't know how to reach for the little knob in your brain and turn down the empathy component, but I do think that we can re-engineer and restructure relationships in a way that doesn't trigger it as much so that we're ultimately creating a little bit of relief. There is one other thing that you kind of said in here that I just wanted to highlight. You said sometimes I end up making up fake scenarios and convincing myself of their veracity. And so that's important because that kind of comes back to something Nick and I have talked about in the past called cognitive behavioral therapy, which has to do with like noticing perspectives, noticing false beliefs, and noticing how that opinion is affecting us and challenging that and learning how to right size our reactions, right-size emotions and just be accurate with perspective. So I would just bring that to you as something you might want to look more into. That's cognitive behavioral therapy. We have some episodes about it. If you want to go to podtherapy.net, go into our archives and just search that phrase, cognitive behavioral therapy or CBT. We have some really good walkthroughs of that, and that really could be something you should take a look at as well.
So I've got something else too that I was just thinking about, and I could be completely wrong about this. So
yeah, probably.
It's happened before, once or twice.
Yeah.
So writer, if this isn't you, forget everything. Forget what I'm about to say. But maybe this is useful to other people who are listening. But I'm just kind of thinking, like, maybe the empathy isn't the problem. Maybe you have empathy and that's just kind of who you are. You're very empathetic, and that's great. Maybe that's not the problem. Maybe the problem is how you define what your role is in other people's lives. Because if you see yourself as being the solution, then that's going to cause undue stress in your life. If you're the type of person who is empathetic or very empathetic, and you see yourself as being the person that solves other people's problems, that is a perfect storm of stress and chaos, because you see a lot of everything they're going through because you're empathetic, and then you have a burden put on yourself that you need to solve it. I think if you're empathetic but you don't see yourself as the solution, you're fine that way. Or if you see yourself as the solution but you're not empathetic, you're going to be okay that way too. I think it's the two of those kind of put together. So, I mean, when it comes to helping other people out, do you see yourself as being the type that I need to come up with a solution? Or do you go into a situation thinking, okay, I'm just going to be a sounding board for them to vent and then help them talk themselves into a solution?
Right.
No, I don't know.
That's a really good observation.
That's just something I'm thinking about, because I think if you're the latter, I think that is going to relieve some of this stress.
Yeah.
You know?
And it feeds off of a cognitive distortion, again, from cognitive behavioral therapy, called personalizing. And personalizing is apologizing for the rain, and hey, this is a good chance to plug my book, because there's a chapter in the book called Don't Apologize for the Rain. Has to do with this.
Did you? I didn't know you
so
wrote a book.
Go read that chapter, writer, because I think that you might relate to it.
I've never hated a book that I've not read before.
I know, right?
Go read the book, damn it.
This is a neat thing.
I need the sales. Dadvicebook.com. Thank you, writer. Thanks for writing in. Well, we are at the end of the show, and since it's the first show of the year, we have some updates that we want to go over about our Patreon supporters at patreon.com/therapy, and we also want to thank all of our supporters, which we'll be doing in this show as well. But before that, are we going to read this? Okay, we got a review, I guess, that's going to separate these two sections. That sounds fun.
Before that, just an announcement: the Pod Therapy store is up and running. We talked about it on the Patreon part of the show. We didn't really talk about it here. So podtherapy.net. If you go there will be a link to the store. So go check it out.
Podtherapy.net. Go to the Pod Therapy gift shop. It's open for business.
And we have a review. We got some really good feedback from Joseph Pangrazio.
Oh,
thank you so much. We appreciate everything you have to say. So this it says, I propose the Jobin rule. Anytime Jim speaks...
I'm intrigued.
Jacob is looking up now. Okay, you have his attention. Anytime Jim begins to speak authoritatively about anything outside of mental health, he stops and instead reminds us of every time he's been wrong on the podcast. The colonies did not have members of parliament. Signed, Joseph Pangrazio.
They didn't have direct representation, Joe. They had virtual representation, which other places in the English Empire had. They were not abnormal. All right.
I don't think anyone made that argument.
Just say it.
I don't recall anyone saying that they were that different from other English colonies.
So I am in favor of the Jobin rule, and because we are democratic, we can put it up to a vote on this show. All those in favor of the Jobin rule, raise your hand. Okay, any of those opposed?
Nay.
All right. And the motion passes.
Jim didn't even understand the raise your hand instruction.
It was a verbal dissent.
And also on
These shows are about to get a lot longer if Jim has to remind us of every single time he's been wrong.
There's going to be a segment.
Yeah. We've got some updates on the Patreon tiers. So, Jim and I have strategized. We've been wanting to add more because we've got a lot of people who have been supporting us for a long time. And maybe it's just our own guilt. We feel like we're not doing enough for them. So we wanted to kind of reorganize our Patreon tiers without taking anything away, but by adding some stuff. So we have some stuff that we want to be adding. So I'm just going to go through and run through this real quick. You good with that, Jim?
Yeah, do it.
Cool. So we've got our TheraPal level, which is anybody that gives us $1. First, we thank you on the air when you join, and you get our sincere gratitude. Thank you very much. And you also, for $1, you get access to the Patreon version of the show, which is the uncut pre-show and post-show.
Whoop, whoop.
So that's what you get for $1.
Extra hour of content.
Moving up to the $5 Therapod level, you get the same thing as the TheraPals, and you get thanked on air once a month. You get access to audio commentary of the therapy movie every 3 months. So this is something new that we're going to be doing. Jim and I are actually going to be watching a movie that is based on therapy or features a therapist. And we will add our own audio commentary to that. So you will have access to that. That's going to be once every 3 months. And you get 5% off on the Pod Therapy online store.
When is Silence of the Lambs slated in there?
It's probably going to have to be the first one. I think that's probably... And I think Battlefield Earth needs to be in the list too.
So, no, that doesn't feature a therapist. That has absolutely nothing to do...
Hannibal Lecter was a therapist.
No. He said Battlefield Earth. Battlefield Earth is what he said.
Yeah.
Oh.
It's a psychology
that's
thriller.
not happening.
No, that's an idiot. That's an idiot speaking.
Again, you don't have a vote, Jim. All right. $10 Therodactyl level. You get everything that the Theropods and below have. You get thanked on air once a month, access to the audio commentary. You get 10% off the Pod Therapy online store.
Ooh.
And you get entered into a drawing for free merchandise every 3 months.
Oh, nice.
Yes. So every quarter, Jim and I will be selecting one item from the store, and we're going to auction it off. Or not auction, sorry. Raffle it off.
Raffle it off.
So, yes. And sometimes it will be things that are in the store. Sometimes it may be something that isn't actually in the store. That's not available for purchase. So we're going to be doing that once every 3 months. So you'll get an entry into that drawing.
So get in now if you're not already a Therodactyl or higher, because it takes 3 months in that category to be eligible for the raffle. So jump in now so you can be eligible in March.
Correct. Thank you. I forgot to say that. And the $20 Theraproducer level. You get everything that was previously mentioned. You get thanked every episode. You get access to the audio commentary. You get 20% off at the Pod Therapy online store, which, by the way, if you've become a Therapod, Therodactyl, or a Theraproducer, you have a discount code available to you. So check your messages on Patreon. I emailed that out to everybody, so you have a discount code there. If you don't see it, message us, and we will get it to you. Those discount codes are going to change every so often, just to keep people from signing up for one and then getting the code and then
yeah, I'm pretty sure there's not going to be
canceling.
a rush on our store, so much so that we would need to guard the coupon code, but whatever. I still like it as good maintenance.
That's probably true. Yeah. So you get 20% off. You get entered into the drawing as well. And then your name is listed as a sponsor for the show on show breaks, and you get recognized as a leading member of the TheraPal community.
Yep, and we should probably note that officially we've kept the Theraproducer group to a closed number, like on Patreon, But the reason we're listing it here is because that hasn't stopped people in the past from just doing it anyway. So if you do it anyway, we will recognize you, though we do try to keep the official board members to a certain number, but that's never really actually been enforced, so whatever.
Well, the table only has so many seats.
Right,
That's
exactly.
Right. There's only so many seats.
We've
Until the show gets bigger, we can't afford more chairs.
That's right.
no.
Or a bigger table.
Yeah.
So go to patreon.com/therapy and you can be a part of that. You can join at any level. And of course, the basic reward there is to hear the entire extra piece of the show. We do double the amount of show every week than you personally hear. And there's a Patreon part of it, which is a little bit more social and casual. It's a little bit uncensored, less censored anyway than a regular show. But we do want to take a second here, since this is the first week of the month, to thank all of our new supporters or supporters who have joined the show, all in total. We do have some new TheraPals. We want to thank and welcome Karen McCulloch, Diana Salgado, and Nicey. I want to say that's how you pronounce that. Nicey or Nisi Garcia.
I'm going to say Nisi.
Thank you to our new TheraPals.
And we have a new Therapod, kind of, Joshua Plummer. Pretty sure I missed him on the last episode, so I apologize, but thank you for joining.
Yep.
And we want to thank all of our Therapods. We've got Adam Petnuzzo, Adam Rebesnik, Angie Ellis, Brad Kefauver, Brooks Lyle, Chelsea Lamb, Chelsea Saracen, Corey Owens, Craig Little, Dave Sorensen, Don Dorr, Elliot Lamb, Felicia Butler, Frozen Cusser, Gavin Bristow, Ian Soto, Ian Whitefall, I Have the Knack, James K., Jeffrey Ackerman, Jessica Cyphers, Jim Hunter, Joseph Pangrazio, Carrie Tierhark, Kate Keller, Katie Chewalski, Laura Dotson, Lauren Izzo, Lori Ellsroth, Linda Brandmeier, Mats Lindgren, Matthew Neer, Richard Bruins, Rocco, Scoopaholic, Scoopatron, Scoopator Ascending, Scoopstronaut, Scooby Jess, Stacy Westerlin, Tess Miller, Three Scoops a Lady, Todd Canfield, and Tracy Replogle.
A.K.A. my mom. And we want to thank our Therodactyls. We have a whole team of Therodactyls in the gaggle now. And we want to thank all of you, Andrea Anderson, Brian Lehman, David Pollock, Fred Bashara Jr., Ice Blue Scoop, Lauren, Lindsay Bashara, Rachel Dustow, Robert Paulson, Ryan Stewart, Slurpee Kaye, motherfucker, and Cindy Ash. I love that name.
And we especially want to thank our bosses, the Syrupy 16, the mysterious and shrouded Illuminati members of the fan club, the Theraproducers. Thank you, Smitty Scoop, Jake Schneider, Robert Brownie Jr. Mint, Kayla Lansbury, Ellie O'Dare, Judy Schneider, Nathan's Hot Dog Scoop, Dr. Ben Don, Crazy Mena Scoop, Mason Miller, Scott Jameson, Carolyn Albert, Leon Kassab, Dan Martin, Reverend Scoop Kevin, Malaya, and Scott Brady.
If you'd like to hear this episode uncut and unedited and enjoy our spontaneous side projects, go to patreon.com/therapy, and thank you for supporting mental health. That's all the time that we've got for this week's session. We want to thank our landlords, the Ice Cream Social Podcast, and thanks to those of you who contributed to our show today. We really appreciate it. Remember, pod therapy isn't something you should keep all to yourself. Share this episode with someone who needs it by opening up the episode's description in your podcast app and copying and pasting the link provided into your social media. Don't forget, you can find us at facebook.com/podtherapy, on Twitter @podtherapyguys, and at patreon.com/therapy.
Do you want to submit a question to the show? Ask anonymously at podtherapy.net or email us at podtherapyguys@gmail.com. I'm Nick Tangeman.
I'm Lord Jim Jobin.
Thanks, and we'll see you for your appointment next week.
Lord Stash.
Lord Stash.
Lord Mustache.
Oh, wait, no, I like Lord Wispy.